Okay, I want you to close your eyes for a second. Just imagine a room. It's a prison cell in Athens, maybe 2,400 years ago. And the lighting is really specific. Think of like a single beam of sunlight cutting through the gloom, and it's hitting just one man. Everyone else is huddled in the shadows. This man, he's holding a cup. He knows, and everyone there knows, that cup is full of hemlock, poison.
It's basically a death sentence in a chalice.
Exactly. One sip and the clock starts ticking. Numbness, paralysis, and then, heart failure. Game over. Now, in a normal scenario, the person holding that cup is shaking, maybe begging for a pardon or at least sweating bullets. But this man, he's looking at the cup like it's a vintage wine he's about to critique. He is completely, almost unnervingly calm. And meanwhile, his best friends, we're talking grown men, hardened philosophers, are in the corner just absolutely losing their minds, weeping, wailing, burying their faces in their cloaks.
It is one of the most famous contrasts in the entire history of Western thought. The absolute serenity of the victim versus the total chaos of the survivors.
And that contrast is exactly where we're living today. We are doing a deep dive into the death of Socrates. We're pulling mostly from the Phaedo, that's the text by his student Plato, who chronicled this whole final afternoon. And we're also looking at how this scene was immortalized in art, specifically in that famous painting by Jacques-Louis David that hangs in the Met.
And honestly, this isn't just a history lesson about a guy dying. It's a masterclass in mindset.
That is the mission for this deep dive. We aren't just recounting a sad story. We need to figure out the logic behind the lack of fear, because Socrates wasn't crazy. He didn't have a death wish. He claimed he had actual, logical, step-by-step proof that the poison in that cup couldn't touch the real him.
Right. He basically argues, look, I'm not the one dying here. You guys are crying over a biology problem, but I spent my life solving a math problem.
So how do you stare at death and say, no thanks, I'm good, and then back it up with facts? That's what we're breaking down. But before we get to the heavy philosophy, we have to set the stakes. Because our sources remind us this wasn't an accident.
No, absolutely not. Socrates was condemned by the state of Athens. The charges were corrupting the youth and impiety, not believing in the city's gods.
Which, looking back, feels a lot like code for you're asking too many annoying questions and making powerful people look stupid.
That is effectively what it was. He was a gadfly. He stung the lazy horse of Athens, and the horse finally swatted him. But here's the detail from the notes that changes everything for me. He didn't have to die.
This is the part that drives me crazy. There was an escape plan, right?
A fully funded logistical lock. His friend Crito, who's right there in the cell with him, had arranged a ship. The guards were likely bribed or, looking the other way. Socrates could have walked out, hopped on a boat to Thessaly, and lived out his days in comfortable exile. He had a literal get-out-of-jail-free card.
And he just tore it up.
Refused to go. He argued that running away would validate the idea that he'd actually done something wrong. He chose to stay and accept the penalty, to prove a point about integrity, and ultimately to prove his whole theory about the nature of death.
That is a level of commitment that is just. It's hard to wrap your head around. It's one thing to be brave when you're cornered. It's another to walk into the corner and lock the door yourself. So, let's visualize this scene. Our source spends a lot of time on that Jacques-Louis David painting from 1787. Even if you haven't been to the Met in New York, you've probably seen this image in a textbook somewhere.
Oh yeah, it's a masterpiece of propaganda in a way. David paints Socrates not as some frail 70-year-old, but as this incredibly muscular, vibrant figure. He's sitting upright on the bed, and the lighting is crucial. He is bathed in this sharp, clear light.
Well, everyone else is kind of blurry.
They're in the shadows, literally and metaphorically. You see his disciples slumped over, faces in their hands. It's a visual representation of enlightenment versus despair. But there's one detail in that painting that summarizes the whole philosophical argument we're about to get into.
Is it the hand gesture?
It's the hand. Socrates is reaching for the cup of poison with one hand, almost carelessly, without even looking at it. But his other hand is pointing straight up. One finger pointing at the ceiling.
Like, hold on, I have a point. Or pointing to heaven.
Both. He's indicating that the real action isn't down here with the cup and the crying. The real action is up there, in the realm of the absolute, the realm of truth. And this matches the text of the Phaedo perfectly. In the text, Socrates actually gets annoyed with his friends for crying.
Yeah, I read that part of the source and I actually laughed out loud. He basically scolds them. He says, what is this strange outcry? He apparently sent the women of his family away so they wouldn't cry, and now the men, his top students, are doing it.
It's a severe rebuke. I mean, imagine Your friend is dying, you start crying because you love them, and they snap at you to pull it together because you're embarrassing yourself.
That is a tough room, but he's doing it to make a point, right?
He is. For Socrates, their grief was a sign of ignorance. It proved they hadn't been listening to his lectures. If they really understood what was happening, they wouldn't be crying. It'd be like congratulating him. He believes he's just moving to the next phase.
Okay, so let's get into the why. Because it's easy to say, I'm going to a better place. People say that all the time to comfort themselves. But Socrates claims he can prove it. Logically, he wants to debate it.
Right. And just a quick side note on the source material here. We often call this the Plato remix, meaning Socrates himself never wrote anything down. Plato, his student, wrote the Phaedo years later. So while the death scene is real, the core ideas are likely Socratic, the specific structured arguments, well, that might be Plato polishing his master's final lecture. He's turning a tragedy into a textbook on immortality.
Got it. So we're getting the director's cut of the philosophy. So where does the logic start? How do you prove you're immortal using only your brain?
You start by splitting the human into two parts. This is the foundation. It's called anthropological dualism.
Fancy term. Break it down for us.
It's actually pretty simple. It just means a human isn't one solid block of person. We are a compound. A mashup. On the inside, you have the body. The source calls this the carnal part. Blood, bones, meat, nerves, cartilage.
The hardware. The stuff that hurts when you stub your toe?
Exactly. The hardware. It's messy, it gets hungry, it gets tired, and eventually it breaks. But then you have the soul, the psyche, the true self.
Okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. How does he know they're separate? Because when I'm hungry, I feel hungry. Myself feels it. It feels like a package deal.
That is the common intuition. But Socrates argues that the self, the part of you that understands truth, that loves justice, that knows that 2 + 2 = 4, that can't be located in the body. If you cut open a body, do you find justice inside the liver? Do you find mathematics tucked inside a ventricle of the heart?
You find bile and blood? Maybe some lunch?
Right. So he argues that since the self engages with things that aren't physical-like concepts, morals, and numbers, the self itself must not be physical. And if it's not physical, it doesn't play by the same rules as the body. This separation is the launch pad. Once you agree that the soul and body are distinct, he can argue they have different timelines.
Okay, I'm with you so far. I have a body, and I am a soul. Now, prove the soul doesn't just poof out of existence when the body dies.
This brings us to argument number 1, the argument from opposites, or the cyclical argument.
This one felt a little bit like physics to me, like every action has a reaction.
It's actually based on observing nature. Socrates says, look around. Everything in nature operates in cycles of opposites. You cannot have waking up unless you were previously asleep.
And you can't fall asleep unless you are awake. It's a revolving door.
Correct. Hot comes from cold. Cold comes from hot. Faster comes from slower. Everything arises from its opposite. It's a pendulum.
Okay. I buy that for temperature and sleep.
So Socrates applies this to life and death. If living and dead are opposites, then logically they must generate each other.
Wait, I get that death comes from life. That's obvious. But he's saying life comes from death.
Yes. He argues that nature doesn't move in a straight line into a brick wall. It moves in a circle. His phrase is, nothing arises from nothingness. If you are alive now, your soul must have come from somewhere. It must have existed in a dead, or let's say, a disembodied state before you were born.
So it's conservation of energy, basically. You can't create or destroy souls, you just cycle them between states.
That's a great way to put it. He argues that if death were a permanent end, a dead end, eventually everything in the universe would just be dead, and nature would stop. Since nature is active, life must be returning from death just as often as death comes from life.
So death is just the night phase, and eventually the sun comes back up.
Precisely. It's not a termination, it's a state change.
All right, that's a logical argument based on observation. A bit abstract, though. The next one feels more personal. This is the theory of recollection.
Yes. This is the epistemological argument.
Epistemological meaning how we know stuff.
Right. Socrates asks a fundamental question. How do humans know things that represent perfect truths when we have never actually seen perfection in the real world?
Give me an example. The source mentions math again, right?
Math is the classic example. Let's take equality. You know what perfectly equal means? 2 + 3 = 5.
Yeah.
Always. Perfectly.
Sure.
But have you ever seen 2 physical things in the world that were perfectly equal? 2 sticks, 2 stones.
No. If you get a microscope, they're always a little different. One's bumpier, one's heavier.
Exactly. Nothing in the material world is mathematically perfect. So Socrates asks, where did your brain get the idea of perfect equality? if it never saw it through your eyes.
Oh, I see. I can't copy it from the outside world because it doesn't exist in the outside world. So it must have come from the inside.
Exactly. Socrates argues that learning isn't stuffing new information into your head. It is remembering what your soul knew before it was born.
This is that aha moment. When you finally understand a concept and it just clicks, it feels like you're recognizing an old friend.
The source uses a beautiful phrase, seeds waiting to germinate. We have these seeds of absolute truth, math, beauty, justice buried in us. Education is just watering them so they pop up.
So the logic is, since I have knowledge that I couldn't have gotten from my physical body or my senses, my soul must have acquired it before I had a body.
Boom. Pre-existence of the soul. And if the soul existed before the body, it is independent of the body. And if it's independent, there is no reason to assume it dies when the body dies.
I actually love this one. It makes me feel like a genius who just has amnesia.
It gives a lot of dignity to the human mind.
Yeah.
It suggests we aren't blank slates, we are treasure chests.
Okay, so we have the cycle nature works in loops, and we have recollection. We know things from before we were born. What is the third one? That seemed like the closer. The final nail in the argument.
This is the argument from affinity. It's about the nature of the soul versus the nature of stuff.
Material versus abstract.
Right. Socrates looked at the world and sees two categories. Category A is material. Wood, stone, flesh, cloth, steam.
What characterizes category A?
It's composite. It's made of parts. And because it's made of parts, it can be taken apart. It can rot, burn, break, or decay. The source calls this the yoke of time. Time destroys material things.
Okay. And category B?
Category B is the abstract, the invisible, the forms. Things like the number 3 or the concept of goodness.
Does the number 3 rot?
Exactly. You can't chop the number 3 in half. It doesn't get wrinkles. It is simple, uniform, and eternal. It is indissoluble.
So the million-dollar question, which category is the soul in?
Socrates says, look at the soul. It's invisible. It rules the body, or at least it should. It deals with abstract concepts. Therefore, the soul belongs to category B. It is divine, intelligible, indissoluble.
And if it belongs to that category, it can't be destroyed. You can't smash a soul any more than you can smash the number 7.
Precisely. So when the poison hits Socrates, what does it attack?
It attacks the meat, the category A stuff.
It attacks the biological machinery. But the soul just steps out. It's like oil and water separating. The body sinks into the earth to decompose. The soul rises to the surface.
Because like attracts like that the soul goes to the eternal realm because that's where it's from.
That is the conviction. And that is why he can sit there pointing his finger at the ceiling, telling his friends to stop crying. He genuinely believes that the hemlock is just breaking the cage, not the bird.
That is a powerful image. Breaking the cage, not the bird. So he has laid this all out. He's convinced himself, or at least he's convinced his friends to stop wailing. Now we have to deal with the reality of the situation. The sun is setting. It's late afternoon.
The executioner arrives. And the description in the Phaedo shifts from high philosophy to this very gritty medical reality.
The executioner brings the cup. Does Socrates hesitate? Does he ask for a few more minutes?
Not a second. He takes the cup cheerfully. He doesn't tremble. His color doesn't change. He offers a prayer, and then he drinks it down in one gulp.
And the friends lose it again.
They break down completely. Plato says he covered his face and wept, not for Socrates, but for himself, for losing such a friend. But Socrates starts walking. The instructions were to walk around the cell to get the poison circulating.
That's so clinical. Walk until your legs feel heavy.
He walks until his legs fail him. Then he lies down on his back. And the executioner starts the examination. He pinches Socrates' foot hard.
And asks if he can feel it.
Socrates says no. The numbness is starting at the extremities and moving toward the core. It creeps up the legs to the waist. It's a slow shutdown of the hardware.
It's chilling because he's narrating his own death. He's the test subject and the observer at the same time.
He says when it reaches the heart, that will be the end. But right before he goes, literally in the final seconds, he speaks one last time. And it's not some grand philosophical statement. It's a chore.
A debt.
Yes. He uncovers his face and says to his friend Crito, Crito, we owe a cock to Asclepius. Pay it and do not neglect it.
Okay, we have to unpack this. Asclepius is the god of healing, right? The
Yeah.
doctor god. Why would a dying man owe a sacrifice to the god of healing? That makes no sense.
This is the final brilliant twist. You offer a sacrifice to Asclepius when you have been cured of a sickness.
Oh.
Socrates is suggesting that life in the body, with all its confusion and meat and blindness, was the sickness and death. Death is the cure.
He's not being tragic. He's saying, I'm finally getting better.
Exactly. He wants to pay the bill for his recovery.
Yeah.
It's a moment of supreme irony and consistency. He held to his view right to the last breath.
And then
A slight shudder, and he was gone. Plato closes the scene with a beautiful tribute. He calls Socrates the best of all we have known in our time, and moreover, the wisest and the most just.
the wisest and the most just. It's quite the eulogy for a man executed as a criminal.
It was Plato's way of having the last word against Athens. They killed the man, but they couldn't kill the argument.
So let's land this plane. We aren't in a prison cell in Athens. Most of us aren't contemplating a cup of hemlock today, but there is something about this deep dive that feels sticky. Why does this matter right now?
I think it challenges the modern view of what we are. We tend to be very materialist. We think we are our brains, we are our genes, we are our data. Socrates asks us to consider, what if there is a part of you that is absolutely untouchable by physical circumstances?
It reframes resilience. If the real you is the abstract part, the part that loves, learns, and understands, then physical setbacks, even physical death, aren't the end of the story. It changes the perspective from fear to curiosity.
And changes how we view learning. If Socrates is right, you aren't just an empty bucket waiting to be filled by the news or social media. You are a reservoir of truth waiting to be unlocked.
I want to leave everyone with a thought to mull over today based on that theory of recollection. If Plato is right, and learning is just remembering what your soul already knew, what seeds of truth are sitting in your mind right now, totally dormant and just waiting for the right question to water them? And if you already know the answers, who were you before you were born to have learned them in the first place?
That is the ultimate question.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
See you next time.